The movie begins with the fine scenery of the snowy city of Connecticut. Adults and children alike are dressed in winter jackets as they protect themselves from the cold that comes with the season. It's Christmas, and the colors of the season are flying everywhere. Grace, a young lady who runs a Christmas store in the town of Green River, is seen attending to an old lady. They chat about the 50th annual Christmas parade coming up soon. Grace's grandparents started this annual parade many years ago, and it has become a tradition in the town. The old lady is excited to be part of it once again. As Grace steps out to put some boxes in place, Caroline comes in with some good news. The USA has agreed to broadcast the 50th annual Christmas parade. They are both excited and express their joy. Caroline decides to give Grace the accolades. She says it's all Grace's effort. Tom White, who is a Santa Claus and runs a Santa hub that trains people, is talking on the phone with Grace. Their plans for the season are intact. Everyone is in high spirits for Christmas. While Caroline and Grace walk down the street, Caroline informs Grace that she has invited many eligible bachelors from around, for her sake. But Grace isn't interested in all that. It seems as though she's still hung up on an ex. Caroline doesn't see why she's so stuck with Mark, the ex. It's a shame Mark couldn't comprehend Grace's idea of Christmas. That was the genesis of their breakup. The next day, while Grace is at the store, she receives a visitor. It's Leslie, field producer for Good Day New York. Grace is awed to see Leslie, and they exchange pleasantries. She congratulates Grace for the feat. She wants to take a little documentation of the store. Caroline, who's so interested in making Grace look elegant, whips out a small makeup kit and attempts to pat her face with it. Grace isn't interested in all that. Leslie is surprised at Caroline's gesture, as she just wants to use her phone to take a little documentation. While Leslie goes on with her documentation, Grace puts on Christmas music in the background. The same button that turns the music on also makes tiny snowdrops fall from the roof. Leslie is very impressed. She goes over to the paintings and drawings on the wall. After admiring them, she wants to know who the artist behind the painting is, and Grace says she's the one. Leslie instantly becomes a fan of Grace. She admires Grace's talent. Leslie hears a sound from the back, and Grace tells her it's Santa Claus. They go to the back and find Santa Claus sharing gifts with kids and playing with them. Leslie's admiration for Grace's work and effort increases. She totally loves everything she's seeing. As the children leave, Grace says hi to Santa. She also says hi to Holly White, Tom's wife, whom she refers to as Mrs. Santa. Leslie is interested in taking a picture with Santa, and Santa obliges. She praises Santa's charisma, and also goes on to praise even more when the cloud starts dropping snow. When Santa comes down from the sleigh, he misses his step and falls down so hard. They rush to him and try to help him up, but he has hurt himself badly. Now at the hospital, Holly is worried. She thinks Tom won't be able to make it for the parade. They now have to find a replacement for Santa as Tom is badly injured. Tom thinks he can make it, and that it shouldn't bother them. As he tries to argue his point, his body movement reveals he wouldn't be able to do it. Grace now enters panic mode. Sadly, everyone at Tom's Santa's hub has been booked for the season. Back at the store, there are tons of people lined up as Santa, auditioning for the role. Grace takes them through the process. They all have serious flaws that don't make them fit for the job. Grace and Caroline go to inspect the band, and that's the only thing that gives them a bit of joy. While they are there, Holly suggests that Ben, their son, take up the role of Santa. She is sure Ben would do a great job. Tom talks about how Ben is supposed to take over his hub, but he has other plans for his life. Tom thinks that Ben would be hard to crack though. Grace makes the call to Eric. Ben thinks Tom can go ahead and do it, despite his accident. Grace argues that Tom can't, and that his parents have spoken very highly of him. She says this to massage Ben's ego, but it isn't working. Grace looks for anything to make Ben agree. She mentions that they attended the same high school, but Ben hasn't moved. He wishes her luck in finding someone who'd do the job and ends the call. Leslie comes around and notices that Grace is having a hard time finding a replacement. She infers that she'd have to revert back to the TV station with this sad news. Grace knows the implication of this, and quickly agrees that they found someone already. Ben White, the man who just rejected the chance to do it. As Leslie leaves, they get confused and wonder how they'll pull this off. Tom is frustrated, and teasingly suggests that Grace cancel the plans as she can't drive to Boston and drag Ben over. Tom has just given Grace the idea of the century. Driving to Boston and dragging Ben back is just the perfect thing for her to do. The Whites are perplexed even as Grace goes on her quest. Grace is now in Boston. She has a picture of Ben on her phone that she zooms in and out anytime she sees someone who resembles Ben. She has collected information from Tom, so she has a tiny idea of how to catch Ben. She enters a restaurant and waits for him there. After devouring a meal, she's tired, so she texts Tom to confirm if he's very sure Ben will be at the restaurant, and he affirms. In a jiffy, Ben enters the restaurant, and this puts a smile on Grace's face. Ben notices the smile and returns it. In fact, he needs her off the table, as that's where he sits to write. Grace isn't ready to leave, as she hasn't finished her quest. She tells him she's looking for a Santa Claus and asks Ben if he knows any Ben White. Ben knows what's coming next, so he lies. He says he doesn't know anyone called Ben White. Just within the minute, the server calls out to Ben to come take his order. He takes it and comes back to a supposed handshake from Grace, but he avoids it. Ben sits and wants to know why Grace is there. He hopes Grace hasn't come to talk him into becoming anything he doesn't wish to become. Grace thinks it's a great opportunity for the town, as Good Day USA would air their parade. She thinks Ben is supposed to see how it should be a privilege for him to be Santa in these times. Ben apologizes, but still maintains that he can't. He's working on a novel and can't afford to use his time for something else. Grace doesn't mind paying him, but that isn't a motivation for him. He just can't be Santa. Ben excuses himself to go take another table. He wishes Grace good luck as he moves to the other table. He also mentions that he'd love to use this time to write till he gets an Uber order as he's a driver. While at the other table, he brings out his laptop and begins fake typing. Grace sees it and brings it to his attention, but he defends it. In fact, he loves the novel he's working on. Grace steps out but is still determined to pull something off. She orders a ride. Ben's phone chimes and it's a ride offer. He quickly accepts it and goes outside to take it. He notices it's Grace who has ordered. Mildly frustrated, he has no option but to go on the trip. She identifies his car, and they both hop in and begin the trip. On their way, as Ben seeks to know which train station Grace wants to go to, she quickly changes the route on the Uber app. She wants Ben to take her to Connecticut. Immediately Ben sees this, he steps on the brakes, making an emergency stop in the middle of the road, and he asks her to get off. There's no way he's driving to Connecticut. Grace has everything planned out. She asks him why he wants to drop a defenseless lady in the scary streets of Boston. She's trying to guilt-trip Ben, but Ben doesn't care. He boasts that there's nothing scary about the streets. Grace now wants to appeal to his senses and emotions. She tells him both his dad and mom would be delighted to see him. She thinks it's a perfect opportunity to see and help his parents. Ben thinks Grace has a point. He hops back in the car and they zoom off. On the trip, Ben puts on jazz music. Grace begins a conversation, and Ben replies that jazz music calms him anytime he has difficult passengers. Grace feels insulted, and she changes the music to some Christmas channel, and then sings along. Ben changes it back to his preferred jazz music. There's an annoying back and forth between them as they both change the channel countless times. While they park to get gas, Grace comes down to get coffee. Without Ben's knowledge, she puts a Christmas decoration in the front of Ben's car. As they drive off, Grace is texting someone, and Ben wants to know who she's texting. She lies that it's her boyfriend. Ben knows Grace doesn't have a boyfriend, as she'd have been driven down to Boston by any supposed boyfriend. He thinks it's Tom, his father. Ben is surprised his dad has begun texting. This puts a smile on his face, and Grace teasingly tells him to smile often. She explains that the store sells all year round. She goes further to explain how she has enjoyed managing the store since it was passed down to her. Ben thinks she should want more from life, but Grace says she enjoys life the way it is. She thinks Ben shouldn't make choices for her. As they arrive in Connecticut, they begin mapping out their route. Grace remembers that Tom had sent her to pick up something for him, and Ben offers to take her there and wait in the car for her. Grace goes into the apartment to meet George. She is wowed with the amazing Christmas decorations and gifts she sees. Ben alights from the car and sees the Christmas decoration on the front of his car and removes it. While Grace moves around the house searching for the box Tom wants, Ben enters. She meets Grace reading Tom's manual on becoming Santa and takes it from her. People who aren't Santa shouldn't read it, he says. Grace orders him to put it down too. He's surprised at this but maintains his composure and drops it. While they talk, the keeper of the place, George, walks in. He's excited to see Ben. Ben mentions that he's dropping by to see his dad, and that's all he'd be doing. Ben speaks a certain language, and this makes George remarks that he's still in good shape to become a great Santa Claus. Every Santa should be able to speak to any child in the world. Tom wants Ben to become a Santa, but Ben has different plans. As they go out, they discuss what just happened, but Ben reiterates that everyone deserves to carve their own paths. They reach Green River when it's dark, and Holly meets Ben. She hugs Ben as she's so excited to see her son. They go over to meet Tom, who's attending to little kids. He sees Ben, and they are both excited. Tom thanks Ben for agreeing to become Santa. This comes as a shock to Ben. He thinks Grace has told them he agreed, but Holly cuts in. They only assumed he accepted, seeing that he drove all the way to Connecticut. He argues that he's there to see them and genuinely thinks they'd be needing his help. Of course they need his help. They need his help in becoming Santa for the season. Ben begins pouring out his heart. His childhood revolves around Santa Claus and Christmas, and he thinks he deserves adulthood for doing whatever he wants. This Santa thing is being forced on him. Ben thinks Grace doesn't understand things from his point of view. He is disappointed and leaves for his parents' house. Even when Holly tells him to stay for the candle lighting, he insists on going back to Boston. When he leaves, Holly promises to talk to him, but Grace thinks it wouldn't yield anything better, as his mind is already made up. While Grace and Caroline walk down the street the next day, she tells Caroline of what transpired with Ben. She thinks it's a shame, and also remarks how cute she thinks Ben is. Grace isn't concerned about Ben being cute, but Caroline thinks there's no harm in getting a cute Santa for herself. Grace asks Caroline if she thinks about anything else besides getting her into a relationship. She says yes. She thinks about getting herself into one too. As they walk by, they see Ben using his computer in a restaurant. Caroline suggests Grace has to make a move to stop Ben from leaving the next day. Maybe stealing his car keys would keep him. Grace doesn't like the idea, and Caroline tries to prevail over him. Grace now goes into the restaurant to meet with the rebellious Santa. She asks to sit, but Ben makes her promise that she won't bring up another Santa episode. The waiter brings some cookies to Grace's account. She wants Ben to join in decorating, but he refuses as he thinks it's meant for kids. Grace thinks he's too uptight and asks him to loosen up a bit. She wants him to enjoy Christmas and all that comes with it. He loosens up, and they both begin decorating the cookies. Ben is impressed with Grace's cookie painting. He references one of her paintings his parents had shown him some time back. Grace replies that painting is just a hobby for her. She mentions that after her parents passed on, the onus fell on her to continue their legacy. Ben gets the message and replies that he didn't run either, he's just following a different path. They veer into talking about the novel Ben's writing. He explains what the novel is about when Tom and Holly walk in. They call on Ben to join them in the candle lighting. They want him to have a little Christmas fun. They all gather around a spot in the city, and the mayor gives a speech. She's excited that they've lit up the street, and it's time to light up the Christmas tree. She sees Grace and calls her up to the state to do the honors of lighting the Christmas tree. It's a perfect opportunity for Grace to talk about the parade. The mayor thinks that Grace has done an excellent job in bringing Ben to be Santa. Grace whispers to her that Ben hasn't agreed to do it. There's a whispering conversation there on stage as to how Grace intends to handle the situation. The mayor thinks his son, Clint, would pull this off, but Grace isn't too sure about that. Not everyone can become Santa. You must be born to do it. The mayor then argues a case for Clint. It's time to light up the tree. As the countdown commences, Grace pulls the lever, and the tree's light comes on. In a few seconds, there's a glitch that puts the light out. As she struggles to pull the lever, Ben quickly finds the control switch and makes a mild repair. He goes over to Grace and joins her in pulling the lever. The tree shines its light again. Tom and Holly discuss Ben's gesture. Holly thinks they should leave the young adults, Ben and Grace, to do their thing. The message doesn't get to Tom as he opines on staying. Holly stylishly nudges him in a bid to make him know he has to leave the young adults. He quickly understands and states that he has to go home as he's sleepy. Making his act so believable, he yawns. At least, that's what sleepy people do. Holly and Tom are surprised when Tom mentions that he'll be leaving at dawn. They were expecting that he'd stay over till after Christmas, but he states his reasons. As Tom and Holly leave, Grace tells Ben she'd travel back with Ben, as her car is still in Boston. Yeah, she lied that she took the train when she indeed drove to Boston. Ben agrees to drive her back to Boston for free even when she offers to pay him. They say their goodnights and depart. While Ben is back inside the restaurant, he searches for Grace's profile online. Coincidentally, Grace is doing the same. Grace gives Caroline the memo. She's going back with Ben but will return as soon as possible. She wants Caroline to put her eyes down and source for someone who can fit in as Santa. She'd rather kidnap someone for Santa than allow Clint to ruin her parade. On the trip back, Grace commends Ben's writing. He thinks his written piece on driving is great, but nothing would stop her from changing the radio stations. It's confession time. Ben confesses that he also looked her up. He commends her family's effort in transforming the history of Green River. Grace is full of pride. The snow is becoming worse, as even the radio station has now announced it. They decide to get off the road to avoid an accident. Ben informs Grace that roads will be closed. Grace's only concern is going back to Green River to prepare for the parade. That's none of Ben's business, though. Grace suggests they spend the night at a friend's place nearby. Ben isn't comfortable with the idea at first, but gives in. They arrive at Jeremy and Amy's house, who come outside with their kids to welcome them. Tucker, one of the kids, asks Grace if Ben is her boyfriend, and she says no. While they are inside the house, it's time for the Christmas tree decoration. As they do it, Grace is concerned about the Christmas parade back in Green River. Ben encourages her and gives her a plan that could work. She's fine with it. Grace teases that Ben would have a hard time, seeing that their host has filled the atmosphere with Christmas. He smiles and says he'll manage. Ben joins them in guessing what's inside their respective gift boxes, and this excites them. Grace looks on, wondering why Ben has chosen to forsake his Santa spirit. Ben notices Grace's state and smiles back. As the family gathers around to read a Christmas story, they are stuck with an incomplete story. Before Jeremy goes online to look for it, the one with the Santa Claus childhood, Ben, begins telling the story in a poetic manner. The kids are excited, and the adults are astonished. Grace wishes this could continue. At the end of the day, they share a couch and spend the night there. It's very early, and Ben is doing some pre-writing. Grace meets him and tells him she had a bad dream but doesn't share. She goes into the kitchen to prepare eggnog. Ben is impressed that Grace can do that. Grace confides that it's her family recipe. She makes Ben check it out online, and when he does, he finds it there. Ben notices the name Mark, and when he inquires, Grace tells him it's her ex. They begin talking about their relationship status. Both of them haven't been in a relationship in a while. As Grace begins preparing the eggnog, Ben wants to know her dreams before taking over the store. He strongly believes that there was something. Grace obliges. She was supposed to go to art school, but that dream came to an end when she lost her parents. She's consoled by the fact that she still has the time to paint and place them in the store. When she finishes adding all the spices, she asks Ben to taste it. As she feeds Ben from the spoon, it spills a little. Both of them laugh at each other, and at that moment, the channels of their emotions open up, and they just stay staring at each other. In their minds, they both agree that kissing wouldn't be a bad idea, and they try to lock lips when Jeremy, Amy, and the kids run in. You know it's a good romance movie when they stall the kissing scene, right? Caroline is back at Green River, putting things in place for the parade. Grace calls her and tells her the plan. As they talk, Leslie comes in, but they don't let her know that the plans are already shaky. Back in Jeremy's house, his kids complain of the possibility that they won't be seeing Santa for Christmas. Ben overhears it and dresses up as Santa and meets them. They are excited. Grace is most excited and impressed. He goes ahead and asks the kids for the kind of gifts they want. He does it with a lot of passion and zeal, and as he leaves, everyone is happy. Grace runs down to Ben to thank him for pulling that off. Grace admits he has just gotten her hopes up again, but Ben advises that she come off it. They confess how they already love hanging with themselves now. The weather wouldn't permit their journey, and Grace is bent on going back to Connecticut for the parade. Ben knows Grace's thoughts. She wants him to drive her back to Green River. While they drive back, Ben confesses that Amy's house has reminded him of how great Christmas feels. Grace feels the same way too, but in her case, it's because the Christmas celebration has now become a job for her. When Ben suggests she quit, she disagrees. She's just glad she can make other people happy. Ben thinks she deserves to be happy, and not just make others happy. Ben turns on the radio and leaves the Christmas song playing, to Grace's surprise. As they arrive in Connecticut, Leslie approaches Grace and is about to inform her that she'd be reporting to the station their inability to secure a Santa Claus. She sees Ben though, and this gladdens her mind. She thinks that Ben is back to become Santa Claus. As they walk and Ben sings, Grace remarks how Ben has been in high Christmas spirits. When they arrive at the store, Caroline informs them that Tom is inside giving Clint a Santa lecture. Tom is having a hard time passing down his knowledge to Clint, who wants to do it his way. Santa Claus can't be done just any other way. Ben infers that he'll be leaving very soon. Grace wants him to stay for Caroline's sweater party. He complains of not having a sweater, but Grace, being gracious, decides to find him one. They get to the party with their ugly sweaters, and as the other guests dance, Ben and Grace take pictures. They get motivated to dance, so they both hit the dance floor. They dance so up close, with their foreheads almost touching each other's. The connection between them has now heightened. They almost lock lips when Clint enters and calls out to Grace. Grace thinks Clint should be home rehearsing, but Clint doesn't think so. His confidence is greater than Tom's, who's been on it for years. He wants to know if the parade will be over before the time for a sports game, and this irks Ben. Before Clint leaves, he tells him off politely. What does someone who isn't a Santa Claus know about being a Santa? Ben knows Clint isn't worthy to hop on the sleigh. He gives a motivational speech on how his eyes have been opened and agrees to become Santa for the parade. Grace is excited, and they hug again. She quickly makes a call to Tom to share the news. Thereafter, someone comes to thank her for persuading Ben to become Santa. The idea of Clint becoming Santa wasn't a bright one. Ben, who comes back with a drink for Grace, now thinks Grace has been using him. He thinks Grace has been pretending there's a connection between them just so he could be Santa. There's a back and forth between them, and Grace can't take it any longer. They leave angrily to their respective places. Ben is home. He tells his dad he's going back to Boston before the parade. As Tom tries to dissuade him, he argues that all that matters is him making a decision all by himself. Tom is concerned that Ben doesn't know how it feels to bring joy to people. Ben wants his dad to be proud of him no matter what he has chosen to do. Tom says he's proud of all the good attributes Ben has. He says this from a place of sincerity and a little bit of hurt. As Ben tries to help him move a box, he rejects it and moves it himself. He tells Ben the story of his idea behind starting the Santa Hub. He tells Ben he has to stick by his ideology that everyone finds what makes them happy. They share a hug, and Holly joins them. Grace goes back to painting. She makes a painting of Ben in a Santa suit carrying Tucker, Amy's kid. Caroline comes in, and Grace informs her of the development. Caroline thinks Ben might be right. She thinks painting will make Grace happier, but she's stuck in Connecticut, sticking her neck out for the store and carrying on her dad's legacy. It's the day of the parade. Leslie has come to inform them that they'd have to interview Santa. Clint complains that he wouldn't want to miss the football game because of this parade, and this upsets Tom. Tom apologizes to Grace for pushing Ben too hard. Holly tells Grace not to love Christmas every day to keep her parents' dreams alive. She advises to live her own life as well. Ben finds his way to Grace's house to return the sweater. He finds the painting of him in a Santa suit. Back at the parade, Clint insists on watching the pregame. As they argue, Leslie comes in and notices the situation. As Leslie talks about taking the segment down, Ben comes in and takes a seat in the sleigh. There's a tussle between Ben and Clint, but Ben prevails. Even the mayor sides with Ben to be Santa. The parade begins, and the whole town is excited. They cheer the parade on, and they are all merry. Leslie and her TV station are having a good time documenting the parade. Ben does his thing with the kids. He was born to do this. While Ben does his thing, Grace really wants to talk to Ben, but Ben is so busy playing Santa. At the end of the parade, Ben looks for her, and they talk it out. Grace thanks Ben for opening her eyes. She says she'll create a balance between painting and keeping her father's legacy. Ben is excited for her and goes to state his new decision. He now wants to follow in his dad's footsteps and also keep writing. He wants to create a balance between the two as well. As they talk about helping each other out, they see the need to kiss, and they finally lock lips, this time without any interruption. Many days later, Ben has written his book, and it's the day of the launch. Grace, now his girlfriend, is there with him. He whips out a box and proposes to her while everyone who's been a part of their lives watches on. They share a kiss amidst everyone's applause.